Well, despite great minds and big dreams, Canadians are laggards in innovation and entrepreneurship. So what's standing in the way of the next big Canadian idea? Joining us now to help answer that question in the nation's capital, Ian Lee. He's a professor at Carleton University's Sprott School of Business. And with us here in studio, Harold Bathelt, Canada Research Chair in Innovation and Governance at the University of Toronto. And we welcome back Claudia Hepburn of the Next 36. Hello to you all. Hello again, Claudia.
Hello.
Okay, economists use these certain indicators to figure out how innovative we are as a country. And I want to compare us to begin with some of our OECD friends. Take a look at these numbers. Gross domestic expenditure on research and development, something called GERD, we rank 15th out of 37. Business enterprise expenditure on R&D, 20th out of 37. Investment in information and communications technology, 9th out of 20th. And percentage of high and medium high technology patents, Canada ranks 6th out of 22nd. Ian Lee, what does any and all of that actually mean?
It means that Canada is doing miserably in innovation. And why innovation is so important is that it is the single most important driver of productivity. And why productivity is so important is that it is the only criterion of our long-term increase in our standard of living. So if we want to increase our standard of living over time, we have to increase our productivity. To increase our productivity, we have to increase our efforts and be much better at innovation.
Okay, Claudia, Ian says we're doing miserably, not mincing his words there. How well are we doing? Or how poorly are we doing?
Well, he puts it in very strong words, but we do know that on a per capita basis, we're about $8,500 below where we should be next to our neighbor, the United States. So this is a problem. It's been getting worse over the past 20 years, and we really need to be thinking hard about different ways that we can involve government, university, academia, the private sector, not-for-profit, and corporations to make a difference.
Harold, you moved to this country about 7 years ago, you said?
That's correct.
Are you surprised to see where we stand on these rankings?
No, because I know before. But I wouldn't, of course, Canada is not a leader in innovation. I think we know that. But there's a legacy to that, of course. We had a branch plant economy with companies not even wanting to move to Canada and not spending much on R&D. But there is now a lot of development in many pockets. In Toronto, around the U of T, there is tremendous development and entrepreneurship around areas like genetic engineering, about medical fields. Waterloo, a lot of developments around the IT sector and software sector. The question we might have to ask, why don't really successful companies, or not many, develop from this? And so I think rather than a problem of innovation, a key problem that we might have is one of translating these early stage firms into sustainable long-term growth firms that provide jobs.
Okay, we're going to talk about how we might be able to do that. But Ian, you know, Harold just said Kitchener, Waterloo, Toronto, Ottawa, and people at home are cheering them. Yeah, go, we're doing really well. Are even those cities doing well in terms of international competition?
Well, you know, when you look at, again, at the comparative data, and of course we most importantly look at compare ourselves to the United States, this problem, I agree with Claudia, it's really been a problem vis-a-vis the OECD for the past 20 years. But vis-a-vis the United States, we've been talking about this all my adult lifetime for the past 40 years. We have underperformed the United States for 40 years. And people can say, so what, you know, so they're doing a little bit better. Well, in plain English, it means they make more per person, which gives them more money to spend on whatever they individuals wish to spend it on. Healthcare, on automobiles, on trips, whatever, on education. And so because we have been lagging, because our businesses are under-investing, at least on a comparative basis, we are paying a price in terms of our economic performance. I would argue, people may say, well then how come we're so successful? We've been successful because our success in resource development has masked our much less success or our failings in terms of innovation and productivity.
Harold, you look skeptical.
Not skeptical, but I think this is part of the truth. So research and development does not measure all innovation. There's a lot of innovation that's actually taking place through learning activities, through enhanced superior learning capabilities that firms develop. I don't think many firms, or average firms, have these superior capabilities yet. And it's true that what Ian said, that that the let's say raw material based industries are that are so strong in our international trade balance, for instance, that they have really not focused enough on innovation. But there are other sectors where Canada is not doing badly at all. And especially around the universities and some of the research focus. And
Claudia,
I think this is an area we should focus on.
Claudia, your project, the Next 36, I mean, you obviously see innovation as critically important. Why do Canadians need to care about where we stand in terms of innovation?
Well, for all the reasons that Ian pointed out so ably. And I would like to go back to Harold's point about that there are clusters in Canada that are doing better than others. And here in Toronto, we are, I think, 4th ranked city in the world as far as entrepreneurship and innovation goes, according to some recent measures that have come out. But why this is important is because Canada may be good at R&D, but we aren't good at bringing that R&D and commercializing it and bringing new products to the marketplace. So we need to, one of the things that Next 36 is trying to do is trying to bring a spotlight on high impact entrepreneurs and get young people who are bright and talented, not just thinking about going into academia and developing research, or not just going into the big corporations that have been long-standing in Canada, but in actually creating jobs and innovating to increase Canadian prosperity by developing the next BlackBerry, the next Cirque du Soleil, the next great Canadian internationally competitive company.
All right, you raised something. I want to read something. This is from Deloitte. Recently surveyed a number of Canadian and American business people about their opinions on the marketplace. Here's what Deloitte found. American respondents were shown to be, on average, a full 13% more tolerant at risk than Canadians. This gap widens to 18% when adjusted for the more negative current economic state and future outlook of American respondents. Ian, are we just more risk averse?
You brought up the Deloitte study. You beat me to it. That was going to be my very next comment.
Thanks to my producer.
My laptop. It's on my screen beside me. This was a massive study that Deloitte did last year. In fact, they presented their findings across Ottawa, across Canada, including Ottawa. And what they found was that we are more risk averse in aggregate across the country in Canada relative to the United States. They also found that there was a lack of, their phrase was competitive intensity. In other words, we have many more industries that are protected from competition, and their argument, and something I have argued most of my adult life, is that firms innovate when they feel pressured, when they feel the pressure to innovate. And because we built the country behind high tariff walls, the so-called national policy of Sir John A. Macdonald, businesses became complacent for a very long period of time, expecting that protectionism where they didn't have to compete, they didn't have to innovate, because they were secure behind the national policy. NAFTA went a good ways towards overcoming that, but there are still protected industries in this country, protected by government policy, therefore, I suggest, would put forward to you, that is the cause of why they're not innovating to the same degree and why they have this culture of risk aversity. They don't feel they have to.
Harold.
Well, I'd just like to point out, there's a lot of truth in that, and there's a lot more initiatives that need to be taken. But I like to point out that, of course, Germans are probably even more risk averse, but very, very successful economically and in innovation. And Canadians might be more risk averse, but there is a lot of interesting developments and innovation taking place. I think it's not so much about this step of not being risk averse and being under pressure and innovating. I think what needs to be developed, if anything, is an innovation culture where learning becomes a normal part of the business, where the end of the day is not when you have the one product launch that is successful for a while, but where you kick in, where you develop markets, generate knowledge about those that actually use those products, and develop this into an ongoing sustainable innovation process.
Claudia.
Yeah, I think risk aversion is such an interesting concept, particularly around innovation and entrepreneurship, because there have been great arguments made that great entrepreneurs aren't necessarily high risk takers. They're people that have an insight and are gritty and persevere with grabbing insights and holding on to them and building people's excitement about those ideas and building organizations to solve them. Not because they're crazy risk takers, but because they believe that this is the most exciting and productive use of their time in building on it.
I don't know that we're going to get through this conversation without talking about BlackBerry. It seems like it comes up in almost every conversation we have these days. But But it is a Canadian idea that has stayed in Canada. And I want to ask you all, we know about the brain drain in some industries. Do good Canadian ideas beyond BlackBerry actually stay in Canada? Harold, why don't you kick us off?
I wish they would, and I wish they would develop here. They stay in Canada for a while, and I think they should. There should be strong efforts to keep them and to keep them localized and regionalized, to have the Toronto region, the Waterloo region, the Montreal region, and so on, or Ottawa region benefit from this. BlackBerry is a case of many mistakes and many problems that might have been made. One of them being it's I think, a company that might have become a bit arrogant on the technological leadership side. That really forgot to look at their customers and what their users actually want, and then making this decision to move into a broad consumer market where they did not have the competences that they had acquired before. So I think this was an area where they needed to switch competences, and this was a very difficult step. But that's a step that all Canadian young firms and entrepreneurs are facing, and that's where they need help.
Ian, are we losing too much of our brain power to other countries? Is that part of the problem?
Yes, if I can just echo what Harold said, I agree completely. BlackBerry was a brilliant company, brilliant innovators, but they forgot Andrew Grove, the famous engineer scientist at Intel, who said only the paranoid survive. And they weren't paranoid enough about their competitors. They became complacent, and they found that they were completely beaten up by Apple and some other companies. But to answer your larger question, we have a curse in Canada. We are blessed and simultaneously cursed by being next door to the largest economy on the planet Earth, and they speak the same language. Mostly. I mean, they're English speaking. We're mostly an English speaking country with acknowledgement to Quebec being unique. And of course, they have a very similar culture to ours in the sense they're both rule of law countries, English common law countries. And so the mecca of Silicon Valley, and I've been there many times, I taught for 2 years in Silicon Valley, the mecca is very strong. There's over 500,000 Canadians living in Silicon Valley because the allure of going there and working with the smartest and brightest people in the world, and potentially maybe getting rich if you get in on the ground floor of an IPO, is something that is very difficult to overcome and to keep Canadians, young, bright talent in Canada.
Claudia, you work with these young, bright minds. In terms of the entrepreneurial culture, I mean, are we lacking? Of course we have some, but are we lacking to a greater extent? And how much of that is just due to where we live, as Ian points out?
Well, I think we are a country of pioneers and entrepreneurs, but I don't think we've done enough as a culture to encourage people to dream really big and build really big businesses.
The Jobs is Zuckerberg's.
Exactly. But so one of the things that we're trying to do, obviously, and many universities are trying to do, is to encourage young people to dream big and to connect them with great entrepreneurs who have built great companies, so that they have people that they can pattern themselves after, because we believe that you can't aspire to what you don't know. Another part of the problem is our tax code, and the corporate tax code is very accommodating of subsidies to R&D. It's accommodating to small businesses, but we seem to have this mentality that small is good, and that once you pass a certain threshold, you go onto the other side. You're suddenly on the dark side, and we can't be seen to be encouraging great Canadian, internationally successful businesses. We need more of those.
Harold.
I'd like to support that. And I'd also like to link to the comments that Ian made. I think he really raised an important issue. We've been close to the US, and that was almost like a natural market for Canadian firms. But Canadian firms, and that is an important issue in innovation, have lacked in internationalization. So Canadian firms are not particularly strong in foreign direct investments in new developing countries. They don't have often strong networks with leaders in Europe or North America and other countries. So this I think should be a real important issue that we have to keep in mind.
Okay, Claudia mentioned one idea that she came up with, maybe didn't come up with, but she mentioned that can make Canada a more innovative country. Ian, name one thing that this country can do to make us more innovative.
I would argue, and I'm probably going to be at variance with my two distinguished colleagues, but I would argue we have to reduce protectionism. I worked in business in the 70s and early 80s in Canada, both for an American company and a Canadian company. They were financial services companies. And we Canadian companies, having worked for about 5 years in each, Canadian companies are more risk averse. The culture is more risk averse. We've got to get rid of that, and one of the ways by doing it is by opening up the economy and by reaching abroad and going away from our traditional markets to Asia Pacific, for example. And we've got to stop protecting things like industries such as telecom or airlines, as was called for in the 2008 Blue Ribbon panel, Compete to Win.
Claudia, you sort of guffawed when
Oh,
you
no,
said the word
I couldn't agree
protectionist.
more. I couldn't agree more. I think government has to be there to provide a level playing field, to encourage transparency and reduce red tape, so reduce the barriers to innovation that individuals and firms would have, and to encourage people to go into areas, study things that are going to encourage innovation. We know that we have a great opportunity in the 21st century to be developing a digital economy. Canada should take a leadership role in that, and we should be doing everything we can to encourage great ideas to develop in the universities and then to get out of the universities and prosper.
Agreed.
Harold, you know, Ontario is already one of the most educated jurisdictions in the world. Is what we need more education?
More education is always good and important because we need to develop further. We need to continue our learning skills. But the one issue I would like to raise to bring into that we haven't discussed is really, we are a great country with a huge capabilities in its multicultural population. Why does this country do so bad in creating these transnational linkages, in supporting transnational entrepreneurship, in activating these linkages to have knowledge flow, to get access to technology pools? I think there is a real question mark that needs to be addressed.
What's the answer? Why are we having this problem? We are so multicultural.
We need to foster this. We need to, with initiatives maybe around the next 36, maybe we need an initiative to stimulate transnational entrepreneurship among these immigrant communities that we have in Toronto and in the country.
How do we fix that? We are a multicultural city, a multicultural province, a multicultural country, Claudia. How do we try and bridge the innovation gap, leveraging that?
Well, I think that Canada is really doing a better job than anywhere in the world of including different cultures and having people work together productively. And I think that we should encourage more skilled immigrants in areas that we need it. I think that we should reduce the barriers to immigrants innovating and starting businesses by making sure that again, we have a level playing field for everybody who's in Canada, and then just try and make sure that everybody has equal access to opportunities.
Ian, you want to take a crack at this one?
I do. I would just add to those excellent comments with which I completely agree that the sad story is that in Canada we have tended to diminish and refuse to recognize the credentials of foreign trained immigrants. There is a lot of, call it protectionism. We don't recognize the medical degrees of or teachers from many countries around the world. So the provinces and the federal government are going to have to show leadership to force the professional associations, for example, to open up and to start recognizing the credentials, whether they be accountants or MBAs or medical degrees or engineering degrees from other universities from the developing world, because this is really a problem of immigrants coming from the developing world, where we in Canada, the professional associations, are often not recognizing their educational credentials.
And that's a great point, Ian. And not only the credentials from people outside Canada, but also interprovincial barriers to trade and to mobility of labor.
You know, one of the things, we can have all the great ideas in the world. We may be risk averse, but if we don't have money to fund these things, we're not going to get very far. I mean, is it difficult to fund new big ideas in Canada? Harold?
Government funding, let me focus on the university side. Research funding is key to development of new ideas in the engineering, in the medical, in many other fields. We are stagnating in that on that end. I think there needs to be serious effect. There are lots of young researchers that do not have access to funding. In the yearly competitions of SSHRC, social sciences, and the natural sciences research councils, what we find is a good proportion of the proposals don't get funding, even though they get very positive reviews. So these are potentially areas that can lead us to innovation, but they will not be performed in Canada because there is no research funding, and they might be performed anywhere else. So I think there need to be, on this end, there needs to be really a strengthening.
Where do you weigh in on this one, Ian, on the money problem? Or maybe I shouldn't even call it a problem. Maybe it's not a problem in your view.
I don't see it, although I'm probably talking about something a little bit different. I'm referring to the Jenkins report and the Council of Academies that showed that we're putting enormous amounts, maybe not into primary research in the universities. I'll pass on that one because I don't have the metrics at my fingertips. But we're actually putting in enormous amounts of government resources. But the problem is the failure has been in, as Claudia noted, it's in commercialization. And so the various reports, and there have been a lot of reports in the last 5 to 10 years looking at Canada's failures in terms of policy, public policy concerning innovation, have been trying to address this by reforming the National Research Council, by reforming the way grants are given out, by putting more money into venture capital. We've still got a long way to go because it's still the handoff, if you will, or the support for entrepreneurs past that initial stage is still very rough. That's the best word. That is to say, our policies are at odds. They're spread over multiple departments. The Jenkins report called for a single department, one-stop shopping, where all of these programs are put under one roof to do the coordination, but we're not there yet.
And I'd like to support Ian's points. Very important. The commercialization is not just an aspect of, it's not just an issue of providing money that can be spent. This is also an issue of ongoing support, advice, and knowledge transfer. This is about is to transform companies that have a technological capability or leadership into companies that can produce also at low cost on an ongoing basis, that learn to listen to their customers also on an ongoing basis and perfect their products further and further.
Ian, when we began this conversation, you said you've been having a similar conversation. I think you said for 4 decades or something. You've been having this conversation, and I'm wondering, as we move forward, I mean, where's the trigger in this? Is this now at the point, in your opinion, that the government has to do something to close this innovation gap, or what's the trigger here? So we're not having this in another 40 years.
Sure. I think we are approaching a tipping point, and it's not being Pollyanna on my part. It's because of the changing world that we're in. We're no longer in the nice, cozy OECD closed club world of the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. That is to say, the emerging world is entering the market, and I'm talking, of course, India and China and many other countries. So this is going to force us to wake up because they are very hungry and they're very competitive, and we know the stories about China producing enormous numbers of engineers. And so if we want to maintain our standard of living going into the future for our children and our children's children, we are going to have to change. So this, I think, there is a lot of consensus. There's a lot of people talking about it. Your show, this is excellent. More and more people are focusing on this, whereas before people's eyes would glaze over and they'd change the channel or they would want to talk about something else. Many people, political parties, academics, and NGOs are now focusing on this issue. We've got to move forward. And so I think in the next 5 years, I'm somewhat more optimistic than I have been in the past 40 years.
Okay, if we all know the solutions, why are we doing them? Why are we implementing them, Claudia?
Well, I mean, that's the beauty of innovation. Innovation is that nobody does know all the answers. And
well, we came up with some pretty good solutions around this table.
Oh, we have. But I think going back to your question about, is there the money for us? I think that often people hear that, and that seems to be a code word for, should the government be putting more money into it? And I would like to, and we know the government now does have a big focus on innovation. It's committed to over $1 billion to do that.
That's right.
But I would question whether that really should be the best way to solve the innovation gap. And shouldn't the government not rather allow 1,000 flowers to bloom? And because we don't know which one is going to grow to be the tall poppy. And shouldn't we be having lots of different experiments throughout Canada put on by different groups, each trying to find the magic sauce for how we can find develop the next Canadian blackberry. And of course, we at the Next 36 feel like we have that magic sauce, and but time will tell.
And I think that what you just said is just really applies to both low-tech and high-tech industries. I mean, on the resource end, we should not just selling our products, we should still try to develop them further. And there's potential for innovation on that end. On the high technology end, Silicon Valley and Taiwan created these famous stories of Taiwanese students and graduates establishing businesses in Silicon Valley, solving the problems of a lack of entrepreneurship in Silicon Valley, and creating these dynamic linkages with Taiwan. So I think, why can't Canada develop something like this and benefit from its great students of multicultural background and really motivate them to do such steps?
All right, I want to thank all three of you for joining us this evening. Thank you very much for coming in. Harold Bathelt here in Toronto, along with Claudia Hepburn, and on Ottawa on the line, Ian Lee from the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University. Thank you to all three of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.